Welcome to Motionbuilder and You. Introduction to Motionbuilder.
Hello, and welcome to the first module of my Introduction to Motionbuilder series. The purpose of this series is to introduce animators to Motionbuilder in a production-oriented environment with easy-to-accomplish tasks. Each new task will build on the previous, allowing you to learn and retain new skills more easily than a traditional how-to video. At the end of this first module, you should feel comfortable merging characters into Motionbuilder, using story mode to apply and edit motion capture data on a characterized rig, using basic features of the pose tool, plotting characters down to a control rig and skeleton, modifying animation using layers, and making seamless locomotion loops. To start out, I'm going to have to ask that we do a little bit of role-playing. You've been hired by a client to do a project in Motionbuilder, but you lied on your application and you don't actually know how to use it. They're going to be sending you some assets for you to use, and they expect the work to be done according to the briefs that they send over. It just so happens that these briefs come in excellent order for you to learn Motionbuilder. I think I just heard the first email come in. Let's check it out. Brief number 1. This is going to be a new project, and we want to make sure that our assets are working correctly in Motionbuilder. We're going to be sending over a characterized rig and a motion capture clip. Can you merge the character into a scene and apply the motion capture data to a story track so that we can check things out on our end? Thanks. This is great. This gives us an actionable list of easy to accomplish tasks, and they happen to be a couple fundamental basics of everyday work in Motionbuilder. Let's check out the assets and get started. All right, so I've downloaded the package of assets sent over by the client, and we can see that we have two items in here: SKM Mani Rig and Walk Forward. We can assume by the naming convention that the first is the rig file and the second is the motion capture file. Let's check back on our brief to see what we need to do. First, we need to merge the character into Motionbuilder. All right, that's a relatively easy task. There are a couple ways that we can go about this. My preferred method is to select the file, hold Shift and right click, and you can come down to copy as path. And then if you come over to Motionbuilder, you can come into File and Merge. Paste in the file location and hit Open. You're going to get this merge dialog box with all of these different options. For now, the only thing that I'm going to change, just out of habit, is I'm going to uncheck Import Take 1 so that it imports without any animation on the file. Come down here, hit merge, and you can see that we have our character in the scene. First things first, before we do anything, because this series is intended for people who have most likely been using Maya all of their lives, the first thing we're going to need to do, just to make things feel more at home, is to come up to Settings, Interaction Mode, and switch your interaction mode to Maya for Motionbuilder only, and hit OK. That way, many of your hotkeys for tumbling and panning and zooming are going to match what you would expect in Maya, and you should feel a little bit more at home. That out of the way, now we can orbit around our character, zoom in, check some things out. Cool, we've got our character in here. Another thing that you should notice is that we have our character controls over here. The character is rigged using Motionbuilder's human IK system, which you may have used in Maya, but this is usually what you will run into when using Motionbuilder. Because the client said that they were going to want to test the character, it wouldn't be a bad idea for us to play around with the character controls and just make sure things are working. First, come over and select a body part. You can grab the chest control, hit W on your keyboard to bring up the gizmo, and just kind of drag him around. Get an idea for how he's working, see if there's any skinning issues. Maybe come over to the hips, drag that around. Just seeing if anything's broken. Maybe we'll grab the arms, play with those, translate them around a little bit. grab the wrists maybe. Just a couple things to play around and get an idea for how the character works and make sure there's nothing broken so we can, in good faith, report it to our client. However, everything looks pretty good. The character is now in the scene. The first item on our list is done. The second action item here is to apply motion capture data to a story track so that we can send it back to the client and they can test out the character on their end. Story mode is a feature you'll likely spend a lot of time using for various tasks inside of Motionbuilder. You can find it easily enough by selecting the Story tab in the navigator, or by using the window dropdown and selecting Story. If your layout does not look like mine, you can get that to match by coming over to the Layout dropdown and switching to the Editing layout. And it should reset everything like this. So if we come over to Story mode, and I'm going to grab this bar to drag it up, just so we get a little bit more working room. You can see it's separated into two areas. This top one is not really important for us right now, so I'm just going to move it up out of the way. And what we really want to be working with now is this bottom section. To apply the motion capture data to our character, you can come over to this gray area on the left side and right click. And all the way at the top, you'll see this insert option, and then come over and select character animation track. And you'll see it made this character track. The character assigned to it is currently none. So if we want to find our character here, we can come to this drop down and you can see Manny is available here. I'm going to go ahead and select that, and we can double check that here in the character controls. We can see that we have Manny available here. So now Manny has a character track assigned to him, but there's no motion capture data on that. Luckily, the client also sent over the motion capture data. The easiest way to get the motion capture data onto the story track is really just to drag it right onto that track, let go. And you can see right away, two things happened. We have this clip now in the story track. It is named the exact same as the file that we dragged in. And we can see that Manny actually jumped back here. And he's now in a walking pose. If you drag the timeline, you can see nothing's happening until we get to frame 25. You can tell that that is where the clip starts right now. And if you look at this green bar here, you can see there's nothing. There's no data right there. And then once we get into that motion capture clip, we can see that it is applied to the character. He is walking straight ahead. And we have technically completed both of the tasks on the brief. However, this is not going to be good enough to send back to the client. We want to send them a clean, professional feeling file. So we're going to do a little bit of cleanup to make this feel nice. The first thing I'm going to do is adjust the starting position of the clip so that we're starting at frame 0. You can select the clip and just drag it and bring it down to frame 0 here. You can also just double click on this top number, hit 0, and it will drag the whole clip over. And we can see it starts at frame 0, it ends at frame 150. We can see that our timeline is actually 150 frames by default already, so that's perfect. Now we have that full clip available to scrub through. The second thing that I would do is to position the character closer to the origin at the beginning of the motion capture clip. This is just kind of a standard way of doing things. It makes the character much easier to find at the beginning so you don't have to search around to find them in the scene. And it just makes things look a little neater. So the easiest way to do that, right now, you can do things like you can grab the hips and try and move them. But the character is not going to move because it's currently limited to this story track. What you could actually do is just come over to this eyeball here on the story track, show hide ghost, click it, and you can see now when we deselect the hips with Shift D and select the track, we have this gizmo here. And if we scrub back to the beginning, That's exactly where the character starts. So you could come in and eyeball it and try and get him lined up perfectly here. However, it is actually pretty easy just to adjust his global position. So let's put it back here. And you can see by default, if you look over here, we are currently in translation mode, global. That's if you hit W on your keyboard is the hotkey there. If you hit E, you can see rotation global, and then R is scale, which we can't do the clip. You can swap easily between global and local rotations by hitting F5 to go to local and F6 to go to global. For our purposes here, I'm going to go to global and I'm just going to adjust these to 0. And just like that, boom, he's right at the origin at the beginning of the clip. We can play through the entire clip. We have all of our animation on the character. And we are good to send it back to the client. A couple of last cleanup items that we would want to do before we send it. It's usually a good idea to name your character track. So if you right click on the track, you can come up to rename. If you have multiple characters in your scene, it's usually a good idea to just name the track the same name as the character so you can easily find it. For this case, I'm going to just name it Walk Forward, and that's done. The second thing that we're going to want to do is just save the file. So if you come up to File, you can see that Save is not available because we can't version up or overwrite anything. We have to come down to Save As. So select that. Let's make a 2 layer folder so that we can track our back and forths. And for file name, let's name this the same as the motion capture clip, but we'll just put Manny's name on there. So we'll say Manny Walk Forward. And because we are going to potentially be doing more work on this, I'm also going to add V0001. I like to do that many because you'll basically never run out of versions. It's very unlikely that we'll do 9,000 versions on a scene, but this way we know we'll never run out. Make sure to have embedded medias checked, and I'll show you why in a moment. And hit save. And then everything on here, default, we can just leave it like that and hit save again. And it's doing its thing, it's thinking, and there we go. So now if we go to our folder, to layer, we can see this is our scene that we just saved. And that's what we can send back to the client. The reason that we did check embed medias, as you can see, the character does have a couple materials and textures, video files in here. And the reason that we choose embed medias is so that it will actually build it into the FBX file. So this way we don't have to send them back and forth. We're not sending back and forth textures that keep getting reapplied. It's always just going to live in this file. When we opened the rig, you can see that it actually unpacked this .fbm folder. And we can investigate that a little bit and see, oh look, these are all our textures for the character. So when the client goes and opens this file, it's going to unpack that same FBM, whatever was embedded inside the file, and they will not have any issues with textures. All right, so with that, we have completed all of the action items in brief number 1. We're going to go ahead and send this back to our client and wait for the next brief.